Som en temps de Covid-19 i des de la Societat Catalana d'Història de la Ciència i de la Tècnica volem pensar històricament el nostre present. És per això que avui comptem amb Marta Lourenço, directora del Museu Nacional de Historia Natural y de Ciencia de la Universidad de Lisboa, coordinadora nacional de la Portuguese Research Infraestructure of Scientific Collections i presidenta de l'International Council of Museums Committee for University Museums and Collections. Parlarem amb ella sobre quin ha estat l'impacte de la pandèmia en l'àmbit internacional de les col·leccions científiques universitàries. Bon dia, Marta.
Bon dia, Júlia.
En primer lloc, pots explicar breument què és l'umac i què és una infraestructura de col·leccions científiques?
There are two different things, okay? So umac is the International Committee of ICOM, the International Council of Museums for University Museums and Collections. So ICOM is one of those international organizations that was created after the Second World War. It was created in 1947, UNESCO and so on, create headquarters in Paris. And it's the largest organization of museums in the world. Okay, it has more than 55,000 members, mostly museum professionals, but also entities that have museums and so on. So that's the ICOM, International Council of Museums. And ICOM is organized national committees, like there is an ICOM Spain, there is an ICOM Portugal, ICOM China, and so on. But it's also organized under special committees, okay? So thematic committees. And one of those committees is umac. It's a committee that addresses the specific nature of university museums and collections. You know, university museums and collections are similar, but they are also different from normal museums. And so it's this difference that umac wants to explore, promote, and give visibility. Okay, so umac was created in 2001 in Barcelona, actually, at the General Conference of ICOM. And it has members all over the world, so mostly Europe and North America, although there's been a significant growth in recent years in Latin America and also in Asia, particularly in China, because China is investing a lot in their universities and in their university museums in particular. And Africa, we're just beginning now to have members, university museums and collections there. But in any case, university heritage in general, whether in Europe or whatever, wherever there's a university, there's heritage, there's collections, there's museums used for teaching, resulting from research, and they don't receive the recognition, the social recognition they deserve. So that's umac. The infrastructure of scientific collections that I'm chair is a different thing, okay? So I'm at the moment chair of both umac and PRISC. PRISC is the Portuguese research infrastructure of scientific collections. And that research infrastructure is really only at national level, so only Portugal. And it is concerned with scientific collections and scientific heritage anywhere. Doesn't matter if they are in universities, in schools like the institutos in Spain, in hospitals, wherever you find scientific collections, we're interested. PRISC, our infrastructure, is interested. And really, PRISC aims to provide a new solution to a very old problem, which is the objects resulting. Science research generates objects. It always did. And those objects typically are not preserved. They are, eventually, they can even go to the garbage, ultimately. And so we are concerned with providing access and providing good conservation conditions to all scientific collections in Portugal. So the infrastructure was created in 2013 and is now included in the Portuguese roadmap of scientific infrastructures, together with many other infrastructures like, you know, meteorology infrastructure, the spectrometer infrastructure, digital infrastructures, and so on. So there's the national roadmap supported by the government, and that's why it's a different solution. It's a kind of a new solution to a very old problem of preserving the heritage that each generation produces. And so we provide services like any infrastructure. We provide 6 services: access, space. We provide space to, researchers, labs, centers, universities to preserve those collections, conservation services too, outreach services, consulting and training services. And we are what? We are 3 universities, the largest universities in Portugal. So the University of Lisbon, the University of Coimbra, and the University of Porto. Together we have probably 80%, or we generate and we have older 80% of the Portuguese scientific heritage. So there's 2 different things, and sometimes it's difficult for me, to put one hat or the other hat.
Creus que la comunitat universitària està generant ara mateix una cultura material relacionada amb la Covid-19?
Absolutely. I have absolutely no doubt that they are generating very significantly material culture related to COVID, okay? It's massive. And in fact, it's material and immaterial. And we at the museum here in Lisbon, we just, as soon as as the COVID problem started and we went into lockdown, and that was like, I don't know, I think 11 March was when our museum closed and all teaching became online and so on. So immediately we created a program to accompany all the generation of objects, material and immaterial, through the 18 schools of the University of Lisbon, especially the Faculty of Sciences, but also the Faculty of Medicine, the Instituto Superior Técnico, which is the engineering faculty. So, I mean, it's crazy. It's just unbelievable what is being produced, both in terms of, objects like masks, for example, or shields, face shields. There's actually 3 types of, okay, let me put this in perspective. More in general, when you think of material culture of science, what are you really talking about? Are you talking about the objects generated in contemporary research, in labs by researchers, by postdoc students and so on? Are you talking about the body of knowledge and resources associated with teaching of contemporary science? Or are you talking about, for example, of outreach? And that means, for example, the perceptions of science and the way science is interpreted to general audiences through newspapers or through, media, social media, through websites, through the communication offices of different departments and different universities, or even services. Outreach is also included, the transfer of knowledge to society. So you can think of services too. And so it's not really one that generates material culture. It's all of them. And all of them are important, from my perspective, to the future narratives that we will, as a community of historians of science, that we will build around the science of today, And so these 3 big axes, the labs and research, the teaching and the body of resources associated with teaching, and the body of knowledge that generates objects, and also the outreach and services to transfer to the society. So if you are in a museum like I am, I have to be concerned with the 3, both at material and immaterial levels. What is really interesting when you work at the forefront of a given field is that, okay, so outreach and teaching, you can always, collect later, because there will be memory traces, evidences. Some are difficult, like students' notebooks and so on. Some are difficult, but they will be eventually collected. What is really striking and important to collect at the moment where science is in the making is really the research part. So how are researchers testing? What mistakes are they making? What kind of bias are they having? What kind of priorities are they giving? How are they organizing themselves? All this generates objects, and it can only be collected at the moment of the making. So that's why the COVID thing is so important now. We can always collect, I mean, teaching, for example, teaching COVID, I don't think that there is yet, okay? But outreach, certainly. And in fact, for the past 2-3 months, nobody has talked more about science in the media than, I mean, as far as I remember in my life, there was never so much talk about science, and also so much misinformation about science, okay? That's another problem that we could discuss in another moment. But so there's a lot of outreach going on. There's a teaching, and there's a lot of research. And this research, you know, the testing, all the service to community needs to be collected, and needs to be collected now. Otherwise, you know, prototypes that do not work, they go to the garbage. They are eliminated, they are irreversibly dispersed, trashed from our, and we want to know, you know, you want to document everything, not only the truth, but also the mistakes, the errors, and so on. And so that's very important for a museum, and also for the history of science, because we collect also for the history of science. We collect for memory, museums collect for memory, and collect sources for the history of science.
Durant aquestes setmanes, l'umac ha impulsat diverses activitats per tal de conèixer l'impacte de la pandèmia en els museus i col·leccions universitàries d'arreu del món. Quina és la teva impressió general a partir d'aquestes converses? Has trobat diferents respostes segons els continents? Ens pots posar alguns exemples?
Of course. Well, umac has organized in June and early July. The last was 3 July. We have organized 5 webinars, you know, informal, really, so that people could get together from all over the world, university museum professionals, okay? And so that we could just, I mean, there was absolutely no ambition to build any body of knowledge about, you know, pandemics or collecting or, you know, it was just, we had this feeling as you in the board, and I had personally, because I received many emails from people saying, yeah, what are others doing? And how are we going digital? And how are we going to reopen? And, you know, so many questions. So we decided to create these webinars, which we kind of left, you know, everyone participated. So we created, it was every Friday. But because we are global, it's always difficult to find 1 hour for a webinar that is not 2 in the morning for someone, you know. So we created 2 time zones. So in the morning, 1 in the morning in Europe and 1 in the afternoon, late afternoon in Europe, so that everyone from the world, you know, from all over the world felt accessible. And we just, you know, without any agenda, without any ambition really to systematize knowledge, we just, you know, shared our experiences. And it was incredible. It was incredibly fruitful, incredibly useful for people. We did a survey afterwards, and we broadcast everything on YouTube. They're accessible, and it's more than 11 hours of video. More than 300 people participated, you know, from everywhere, every continent. So that's an incredible resource too for museums that are reopening. Yeah, that are not reopening, you know. So yeah, what became evident was, well, 2 things. There were issues related to going digital. So university museums, as universities closed down and transferred all teaching online, university museums had to go digital because they were forced to close. Yeah, even when governments had not yet imposed lockdowns, universities in many cases, like for example in Portugal, closed before and transferred all the teaching online, so the museum closed. The only thing that we did not close was the botanic garden. I can get back to that point later because botanic gardens are super important for people. But anyway, so what do? You all of a sudden you lose your audiences. Your audiences are in lockdown like you, so you really have to go digital. And in that respect, it was not different from other museums, so everywhere. And that created many issues because museums were not prepared. There was the issue of giving resources to the staff to reorganize a little bit. So that was the first thing: how to reach your audiences while you were closed. That's the first thing. The second thing that was very much discussed was, okay, lockdown passed, now we're reopening. How are we going to reopen? Is it just exhibitions? What restrictions? Is it also access to collections? Do we give access to collections? How are we going to do that? Do we impose different circuits like IKEA kind of circuit, that unidirectional, or so the webinars are very interesting because if you follow them chronologically, you realize that as the situation, it's actually an interesting document for cultural sector and how, the cultural sector, museums in particular, followed the pandemic as it evolved. But yeah, you can see all these issues coming back, and then what are we going to do? And then, but now we open, but now we're closing. So it's incredibly interesting from a point of view of a professional or as a resource, but also from a point of view of history and how, museums are going through these issues.
Podries explicar per què els jardins botànics van romandre oberts?
One of the interesting dimensions of the pandemic, as museums and other space, restaurants and hotels and so on closed, is that people felt the need. They always could go out for specific reasons, but they always could go out. And one of the things that we found here in Lisbon, but not only, was that people wanted and needed for their mental health, for their, for their sanity, for their feeling good, comfortable, and so on. They needed open spaces and parks and so on. So we were very, very hesitant about closing the Botanic Gardens. We only closed during 1 week at the time of really when it was the purest lockdown. You couldn't really not go out because they were always visited by people because the space, you can keep social distance, and there's also nature. You cannot go out, you could not travel, you could not do anything. So Botanic Gardens and the parks, in specific terms, our Botanic Gardens here in Lisbon were very important for access for the community here in Lisbon, especially the hood.
Relacionat amb el que estaves explicant abans, alguns països ja estan en procés de reobertura dels seus museus i fins i tot molts ja estan oberts. En la planificació del retorn ens trobarem amb restriccions físiques? S'aplicaran quarantenes als objectes?
Yeah, you are. It's already been a cliche. The world has changed significantly. So it's the same. You go to a restaurant, it's not going to be the same thing. You go to, the beach, it's not going to be the same thing, at least for now. And the museums are no exception. Okay, so you will find in museums across Europe, but not only Europe, restrictions. You'll find they vary a little bit because depends also. There's kind of general rules that you have to respect, the health rules from the Ministry of Health and so on. But then they have local translations. It depends very much of the space you have. If you have your exhibitions, if they are already in a sort of sequence display, or if they are, dispersed, if you have a garden, if you have open space where it depends very much. So you have to, every museum has had in the past, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, looked at the rules that come first from the Ministry of Health, so from the government, then to the university. In case of a university museum like ours, we had to look into the guidelines of the university also. For example, in the university museums, it's complicated. If the university is closed and you are a museum inside the campus, it's very complicated for you to open. You cannot open because you are inside the campus. You are in the, that happens, for example, in many universities across the world, including in Spain. I'm thinking, for example, of the Complutense University in Madrid, where many of the museums are inside the campus. If the campus is closed, you cannot really think of reopen, even if other museums are allowed to reopen. Do you understand? So there's this local issue that you have to solve it. So each case is different. But certainly there will be the use of masks, there will be restrictions in access to exhibitions, for example, science centers, or interactive exhibitions. There's going to be a problem because you have to either, you keep the interactives, but you have to disinfect at any moment. Many museums are discontinuing or interrupting, suspending all the interactive exhibitions. Also leaflets, everything that you touch are becoming dematerialized, so you can access through QR codes. So it's going to be a very, very different experience for visitors. That's why botanical gardens doesn't change much, That's why also it's easier to adapt, and botanical gardens just open the door, okay? And there was a time where you could not sit and so on in some the benches, but it's much easier, gardens and parks, than museums. But in order to respect, it's complicated and it's different for visitors. And a significant aspect is that visitors are not coming back, okay, yet. At least I don't have reliable data to give you across the world, but I have my experience here, and visitors, although they're coming back to the gardens, absolutely, and it's growing, attendance to gardens. The number of visitors is growing. To the museum, people are still not confident, okay? I think that people, it's the same with restaurants, it depends, it's just people are afraid because this is so uncertain yet, the health situation, and people are not confident enough to go.
El tancament dels museus ha anat acompanyat amb l'auge del món digital. Ens preguntem sobre el futur de les col·leccions i els seus públics. Quin pes tindrà això en els usos de les col·leccions? Caldrà una reorientació online de les activitats museístiques? Com s'adaptaran els museus universitaris?
Definitely there will be, I think, in my view, a reorientation towards digital, okay? It's actually already happening. There are several levels to that. The first thing that museums did was everything that they had digital and were not online, they put it online. Okay, that was the first level. It's very basic. You just, you have images, you have videos, you mobilize them to a digital platform. And that was super easy. But easy. I mean, it's the first level. You could have done that before even without the pandemic. But I believe that this change needs to be more structured and more reflected. And at the same time, more structured and reflected because it's going to take a while. So you really need to not only be a postcard of the things you already have, but you have to create content. You have to be more deliberate when you create content online for your audiences. And that includes exhibitions, collections, and so on. But at the same time, I'm a bit ambivalent about this because I think that it's a dangerous, it's kind of, it's hard to explain, but it's not hard to explain, but it's as if you go too digital, it's as if you're denying the reasons for your very own existence, okay? So museums are about firsthand encounters with objects, okay? And in art, everyone understands that looking at the, Las Meninas, okay? Las Meninas de Velázquez, okay? Or looking at the Night Watch at the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam, with your own eyes. The emotion that comes through, it's something magical. It's something that you really have difficulty in apprehend and cannot translate at all through image. I mean, it's not possible. Image is just a question of access. Okay, so yeah, okay, I've not been to the Rijksmuseum, I can't, inequality, I don't have money, I cannot travel, I live in, I don't know, whatever, the distant part of the world, I'm rich but I don't go, and so on, so I can access online. That's the thing. But this can never, never replace what we're here for, and we're here for the real experience, which is emotional. It's very much about your heart, how you feel, and the way it changes you, transforms you. And this is very easy to understand with art, but it also happens with science. And not only objects of great, scientists like, the finger of Galileo that is in Florence and so on. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about really looking, really contacting firsthand and understanding, and understanding how a cannibalized object, for example, was transformed, was adapted to serve the needs of research and so on. So we are in the business of real encounters with real firsthand encounters with objects. And so, yeah, it's tricky. You understand? Good that we go online. And I believe there's going to be more resources from governments and maybe even the EU to digitalize collections, because we realize that many museums are not prepared. The collections are not online, they're not accessible and so on. So I think there will be even resources for that, but we need to be aware that we are about the encounters and we preserve things for those encounters, for future generations, okay? We cannot just dismiss, okay, everything is online now, and even, through super high definition and so on. And so we just close because, yeah, that provides the experience. Wrong, totally wrong, okay? So we have to balance these two very difficult approaches. How it's not that there are approaches that are difficult, but the balance is particularly tricky. And we need to explain very well to society why we're here, museums, and why we're here, why we preserve things for the future.
Per últim, preguntar-te, com afectarà la crisi econòmica actual al futur immediat de les col·leccions universitàries?
I think nobody can answer that yet, honestly. We don't know, because even universities don't know yet, and even governments don't know yet. The only thing I think we can answer is that the impact is going to be big. Okay, it's going to be a major impact economically. I just read last week a study by the American Alliance of Museums that indicated that 1/3 of museums in the United States will probably not survive this year, or they closed and will not reopen again. But again, that's one of the things that's also happening with restaurants, with small businesses, with hotels. And so we don't know. We have to remain attentive. And look, this is such an incredible interruption to life as we knew it, that we have to remain attentive and supportive. And in fact, museums are just a tiny part of the problem, because the cultural sector in general is going to be very, very affected by the crisis. We don't know for how long, especially the cultural industries and so on. So, but there's no doubt at the same time that museums are probably more needed than ever, because at the time of such uncertainty, change, there is something that brings us together as a community and as a society in museums, because museums are all about this tension that you have between a shared collective legacy that is shared by everyone in a given community or region or country or whatever. So that's kind of eternal because it's something that you want to pass to the other generations. So this tension between that eternal thing, but also at the same time, when you enter a museum, you confront yourself with the limitations of your own individual life. You know, you die, and because things have been there for decades. And so it's an opportunity, museums, to confront yourself with the shortness of life and the limitations of your own contribution. So museums are this is part of the magical of museums. They are about this tension of eternal, something that is eternal and something that is ephemeral. And I think everyone feels it differently, okay? But they have this property, if well explored by us, you know, in exhibitions and activities and so on. So I think this tension is super important in moments of crisis. And I think that we have a role to play in this. We didn't figure out yet, but we museums have a role to play in these times of big uncertainty and change. But yeah, we have to remain attentive and fight for existence if needed, for resources which will be scarce for everyone. And because we're talking about the whole society, and we're talking about suffering, we're talking about grief, we're talking about inequality, unemployment. But we have a role, I think, to play. We're just not figuring out yet, you know. We're not yet in the new normal. Not even. We're not in the new normal. We're just figuring out everything as we go, every day, one after the other.
Thank you very much for your answers and for your collaboration.
Thank you.